So today, let's see here, 29. No, not 8. We're not going back to August. All right. So equations with fractions. I'm going to make a suggestion right off the bat here on step number 1. Find the lowest common multiple, or just multiply the two denominators together. That is my very much large suggestion here. So rather than try and count by multiples, again, if you want to talk to me at some time about making it go a little faster, we can. But I really do think just multiplying the denominators together will help us. We'll have bigger numbers, but that's what we got a calculator for. So, example 1, step 1. I see all these fractions, okay? You're going to find the numbers in the bottom, the denominators that are the same, okay? Well, that aren't the same here. I'm just going to circle those. And you're like, Hardy, why didn't you circle the other 6? Because I already have a 6. If they repeat, I don't need to do it more than one time. So as we're doing it, we can get back to that. Yeah, I just want to make sure we're doing the current one so you can kind of see what's going. So, as we're doing it, we're going to multiply these together. So what's 6 times 3? 18. Okay. So we are going to multiply through here by 18. You're like, ugh. This could get kind of interesting. Whether it's a fraction or whether it's not, we're going to multiply the 18 by it. So here's how this works. There's 2 ways I can do this. Let me brighten this up a little. On my calculator, I can either do 18 and put any fraction in parentheses. And again, we don't have a fraction button. We just use the divide button for that. But if you put it in parentheses, it'll work. So I get the 15 and the x. If you weren't comfortable with that, your other way you can do it is by doing this number times the number on top, and then just divide by the number on the bottom. Get the same thing. And so by doing that, you're like, even just like 18 times 3, 18 times 3, yeah. But it's critical that when you're doing the fractions, you're using parentheses. Because if you don't, funky stuff's going to happen. And if you have x's on stuff, it's going to be important that you leave the x. Because if you don't, that can cause a problem too. And I'm going to treat this as a negative. Okay, because I see minus, so I want to make sure I take the sign with me. So by doing that one step, by multiplying through everything by the 18, now it's back to a regular equation with variables on both sides. So if I need to go back further in my packet to see some problems like that, I can, but we're going to have it here too. So job number 1, we want to get all the x's together. So it doesn't matter if I undo the positive 12 with negative, or if I undo the positive 15 with a negative. I'll end up with the same answer at the end. And little things, like noticing that's a minus or a negative 3. Bring the signs with. Because some of you on the quiz did a super job and just had some detail issues like that. So we're doing all right there. Once all our x's are on one side, whatever's with the x has got to go away. How am I going to move that plus 54 out of there? Minus it. And I'll make one more bit of advice even, not that I haven't given enough already. if the whole negative positive thing kind of makes you itch your head, it's not a terrible thing to go to your calculator to get some assistance. I still say if you think about money, it'll get you into better shape. And that last step to divide by 3. Again, paying attention to positives and negatives if you're not sure. Okay, let the calculator help. So once the fractions are out of the way, we're pretty straightforward with what we're going to be looking at as far as that goes. So you're like, okay, yeah. Sure, multiplying the 18 times each of these. So like if I do 18 times 5 over 6, that's where my 15's coming from. If I do 18 times 3, yeah, if you're going to try and do it separately or in your head, you multiply by the top number and divide by the bottom one, if you want to go that way too. But usually just popping them into the calculator is going to make things go quickest for us. And so even on the next one, okay, as long as the numbers are different in the denominator, we just multiply them together. So 6 times 10 is 60. So this time, we're going to multiply through by 60. Even if things are not fractions, every term is going to get a 60. And then we let our help come in. Again, I can't put the variable in there. I can only put that part in. So I got 50 there. Don't lose your x. And one more time. Get those fractions into parentheses. All the fractions are gone. Take a peek. This time, I don't have x's in both places. I just have an x here. There's nothing wrong with that. And we go back into opposites again. We got to get rid of the plus 120 from this side because we got to get the x part by itself. If the numbers get a little funky, not a bad thing. Fractions are all right. Decimals are okay. Oh dear. Just the thing I'm telling everybody else to keep an eye on, and I don't do it. Oh, dear. Okay. Here's where we go into hearty recover mode. I just had it brought to my attention incorrectly. There needs to be an x on my 60 here, because 9/10 x, I didn't do that. So, oh, dear. Well, we're going to have to fix this up. Yeah, whenever I see multiple hands go up, I'm like, oh dear, I've done something bad. Well, it wasn't bad. It's just honest mistake, but it's what I see some of you do, and now I'm doing it too. Okay, let's try that again. We have x's on both sides. Since this side only has x's, it would be easier to get all my x's to the right. Okay, if I moved them to the left, it would be okay, but I still have a 0 there. All right, let's try this again. Okay, much better, much better. And divide. Now, I am going to say one thing before we just bebop along here. because I saw this done on the quiz, and I want to make sure we understand this moving ahead. So if I've got this problem, if I kind of rewind for a sec. So some of you, if there was a question like this on the quiz, and there was, some of you are like, well, I'm going to move to 54x because I like moving it to the left side, which is fine. But here's the one thing we can't forget in that case. There is still a 0 over on the right side. If you wipe out everything, there's a 0. And that kind of threw some of you off, but I still could solve it that way. And I still can get to the right answer. Because if I divide by -4, I still get 30. So just to let you see, it's not like all is lost if I do that, but it does become more of a play on our brain because recently that cancels out. I just don't have it there anymore. But then you look and you're like, well, but now I don't have an equation. You do. It's just a 0. That's why we like to move this over to the side that only has x's just to make sure that we don't run into that problem, hopefully. That's the goal. So, thank you again for helping me out on that one. I needed the assistance. Don't get those too far away because we get to jump into the new packet here. Very first page. Definitely not notes. This is practice. We're going to be working on pages 1 and 2. And so there's a couple of these I want to walk through with you because you're going to look at them and you're going to go, wait a minute. The first one I think you might say, wait a minute on to me, is if we're rolling along here and you're like, well, what if, what if I'm doing, let's say, let's just say the first one even. So I look at the first one. Okay, there's my numbers in the denominator that are different. So I multiply them together. And I get 10. So the 10 is going to get distributed through all the terms. So you're like, well, wait a minute. So I can't put y over 2 into my calculator. So what am I going to do there? Okay, if you have a variable there, we're just going to put a 1 for our calculator's sake is one way. Oops, wrong calculator. Is one way you can do it. You could do 10 times 1/2. That would work. Or if there's a variable there, you can just divide by this number. 10 divided by 2. But does that feel real distributive property? Not really. So again, if you don't see a number in front or there, you can have one. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this next one. 10 times 1/5. Bring all my variables this time. And the 10 also multiplies to the 21. And now we just work with the things that we were working on before. Same side of the equals. Do not try to subtract them from each other. They're not on opposite sides. They're on the same side. So we just add them up. Then divided out, 210 divided by 7 is 30. So I wanted us to, again, to be aware, if you don't see a number in the top of the fraction, there is a number there. It's just 1. Anytime you see it. And we can do that. Okay, that's an option. If you run into a situation, because we hadn't seen this yet, so I come down a little further, and I look at number 5, and I'm like, now wait a minute. 4 and 8 and 2, those are all different. But on the notes it says multiply the two denominators together. Well, sometimes if there's more than two that are different, we're going to multiply more than two together. Now on number 6, I would just want to do 5 and 10. If it repeats, I don't have to do it twice. I mean, it wouldn't hurt if I did. But here, 4 times 8 times 2 is 64. And so that's the one that I'm going to send all the way through. And I'm going to work on getting my fractions in with it. Here, with that being minus, I want to include that when I'm punching in my 7/8 here. So I'm going to punch in negative, the button down here by enter, not the minus one up here, but this one. Negative 7/8. So we get our minus 56, no variable there. And then 64 times 3/2. Has the x though. So we're back in a situation like we were. This side only has x's. Let's move all the x's over that way. So we still got the negative 56 we brought our sign with. And we're to that last step, which typically is going to be divide. We are going decimally here for sure. Negative 56 divided by 48. Round in the nearest tenth. So negative 1.2. The 6 makes us round up. But whenever you see the fractions, again, normally it'll be 2. If you get 3, it is. But just the ones that are different, you need to be multiplying together. The repeaters, we don't have to play with. Hallelujah. So you're like, okay, that's normal. That's normal. Okay, Hardy. Yup. The other one Mr. H is going to jump in on here, because it's been a while since we've done one of these together. And it might help for some of you that might go and decide you're going to go into retake mode on the last quiz. Mrs. Thorpe rented a car for $75 a day plus $2 a mile. Write an inequality, okay, which is like an equation. Some of you on the quiz, when it said write an equation, you still wanted to make a proportion. So looking for words like that can help. To find out how far she can get away from Rockford if she wants to spend no more than $325. Okay. So I look, and I'm like, all right. She's going to spend $75 a day plus $2, like, per mile. So for every mile she's driving, we're having to pay. For the day, I don't have to do that. I know I want 325 at the end, but I know this isn't an equation, so I can't just put equals. If it said equation, I would. No more than means I want to spend less than $325, and less than goes left. And since she says she might spend $325 as well, I'd put this, but I'll be honest, if you gave me something like that on a quiz, I'd take that. That's because that's absolutely just fine. But the rest of them on here are just equations and dealing again with fractions and getting used to that stuff. So practice here on page 1 and 2. I got a key up front. I will be around as well.